Welcome to the Operational Technology Cybersecurity Best Practices Clinic brought to you by Fortinet. We are glad that you could join us today. This is part 2 in a 3-part series of our Best Practices Clinic, but it is a content that also stands alone, so we're glad that you made time for our second session. If we jump on to the next slide, let me give you a preview of the 3 parts of our clinic. Last week we covered visibility, and if you are interested, we're happy to share the replay of that session. You can make that request in the chat or via the email that you received with your reminder this morning. Just reply and we will send that to you. Today we're covering control, talking about enforcing security across the network. And then next week, our third and final in this 3-part series is on situational awareness, talking about actionable intelligence built on a continuous analysis of your systems. We're glad you joined us today as we dive into the topic of control. But as we move on to the next slide, let me just give you a couple of housekeeping items for our session today. In the console within GoToWebinar, there are a few things that you can leverage as a part of add-ons to our session. The first is the handout section. You'll find 2 supporting materials for today's session. The first is a copy of the slides in PDF form. Feel free to download those and take them with you. And then also an ebook that talks about the complexity and challenges of complexity within an operational technology environment and some of the cybersecurity considerations that you need to review. Questions are welcome, which is the second part in our guide today, and you'll see a widget inside the GoToWebinar console where you can post questions for our speaker. We'll definitely have time at the end of our session and we'll address as many as we can. And to those wondering, yes, we do have a replay of the session. It is recorded and will be available in about 24 hours from the session completion today. You'll get an email with a link to replay that session whenever you would like or to share with a colleague. Let's jump in and introduce our speaker for today. So our 3-part series last week, Rick Peters covered visibility. Today, we are honored to have Carlos Sanchez with us. Carlos is the Director of Operational Technology, focusing on the central region of the United States. He has been with Fortinet for a few years and has been 100% focused on cybersecurity challenges and supporting customers in operational technology. Prior to Fortinet, Carlos has a great set of experience covering many segments of the oil and gas industry, from rigs to applications in and around midstream, downstream, upstream for that environment. He's also a veteran of the Air Force, and we are glad to have Carlos with us today. Welcome, Carlos.
Thank you.
Before we get started, let's have a quick poll of the audience. Carlos, do you want to introduce the poll on the next slide for our listeners?
Yeah, thank you, Cheryl. Yeah, we would like to get your impressions in your production environment. What do you consider the greatest threat to your plant controls or measuring devices? Will that be access controls, device visibility, unauthorized users, remote users, or segmentation of east to west traffic?
So I've launched the poll out to our audience. We'll collect some responses here. We'll give you guys about 30 seconds to pick your best. You want to comment on any of these, Carlos, based on your experience? Is there any one that stands out to you as you've worked with different operational environments?
We see a resurgence of the need for analyzing east to west traffic. Most of the security models establish, take an approach of north to south traffic management, while as the threats that we see in the environment right now in the business are taking advantage of that and propagating threats after a breach east to west.
We've got a great response from the audience. I'll give you the statistics. So 25% selected access control, 25% selected device visibility, 23% selected remote users, 17% selected unauthorized users, and 10% picked segmentation of east-west traffic. So rankings went almost top to bottom in our list of choices, with the exception of the bottom 2, unauthorized users ranked higher than segmentation.
Wow, interesting. So definitely definitely tells a lot about the business and how we are, the direction that we'll see things going in the next couple of years, especially in these times.
Take it away on our topic about control, Carlos.
Excellent. Today we're going to talk about control segmentation as a proactive approach to mitigating risk. As IoT devices flood the networks, including operational environments, there is a growing need for continuous verification of all users and devices as they get critical and corporate applications or get access to critical applications and corporate applications, data, resources in general. The time has come to apply controls to protect networks and applications and provide the least access privileges and determine who has an absolute need to access our resources. Control requires visibility. That was the first part of our three-part series. And strong authentication capabilities, powerful network access control technologies, and pervasive application and access controls. And that is consistent with the concerns expressed during the poll. Everything starts with visibility. When we're talking about best practices about NOT, these are the three fundamental concepts, and there are the topics of our chats. Visibility, and mostly, when we talk visibility, we're talking about device discovery and profiling, role access and multi-factor authentication for users, either local or third party, application and traffic visibility and profiling, and that can be done either passively or actively. Application and traffic identification on known and unknown threats, of course. The second part, which is what we're going to talk about today, is the control part. And depending on each system, we're talking here about each system doing the job that it's supposed to do. And under control, there are some concepts that we're going to talk about, not only access controls, but also traffic steering. And what we want to do with traffic steering is ensure that only the devices that need access to certain resources have that access, and that access can be monitored and audited eventually. So when we're talking about controls, we're talking in reality about creating secure conduits from the critical applications and devices all the way to the locations that they need to go. They can be exercised in any part of the circuit, really, when we think of it. From A to Z, source and destination. Mapping traffic of source requires continuous monitoring and learning. So this process of identifying who is on the wire, who is in our facilities, it is a constant, it's a continuous process. It really never stops. That level of visibility, that level of control will definitely give us, give us the awareness necessary and actionable intelligence items in how to proceed in the future. Focusing in on enterprise security operations, that Gartner notes in their 2019 security trends. Security operations centers are now in ever increasing numbers, shifting investments, resources, and time from threat prevention to threat detection and proactive response. Not only that they know that organizations are dealing with increasingly aggressive threats, where rapid response is in minutes is not only desired but required. This forces organizations to reduce that type of response, because again, the window that we have to correct a negative action is ever reducing. So we're looking at lesser times to have an accurate response. Finally, our organizations are recognizing the best-of-breed security products and buying as a result resulted in many vendors, unfortunately, which is one thing that we see as a concern. In the security arena, multiple vendors can lead to alert fatigue, and usually it takes a lot of effort to have a concerted response of all these devices and applications. So we see, according to Gartner and the market trends, especially in the digital transformation of operational technology properties, there will be 3.7 billion installed IoT devices and IoT. So this requires definitely a different security posture, along with the telecommuting, which in the last year has become a big factor, and BYOD devices. Identity is a cornerstone of security and controls. I mean, who is the user and what access do they need? We all are aware of RBAC, role-based access controls. But as I said, identity as a cornerstone of effective security policy and creating is the foundation of creating a trust model. We're going to manage access to help secure, control, and manage and monitor ultimately. I mean, all the access to critical assets. On the internet, enterprise and OT environments, there must be password control, and as I say, role-based or what we call RBAC, and an integration of all the devices and have a single view of how all these devices are going to be accessing and the people that control those devices, how they're going to have access. So we see an increase in brute force attacks. We see an increase of insider threat as well. So getting a security posture where we have not only authentication on role base, but single sign-on controls. I mean, not only that this reduces fatigue, but it also creates a centralized location for the security technician to have a clear view of the people that are accessing the systems. Continuing with network access, I mean, we're looking at an ever-expanding perimeter, and that perimeter, in order for us to protect that perimeter, I mean, the four walls of the data center no longer exist. It used to be it used to be siloed out that all the only access to resources came through the data center or perhaps an office. Now that those borders, I mean, they have in many cases have become virtual and have been expanded. So we don't necessarily, although we will love to trust, I mean, our insiders, or we will love to trust, I mean, our employees. Unfortunately, either maliciously or not, there's some degree of audit that needs to happen in the event that there is an incident. So we need to not only be aware of the outside threat, but also the inside threat, either being malicious or not. So what we're looking at is, or what we recommend is creating microsegmentation and controls between these zones. And in that model of microsegmentation, we're going to look at data as it ascends, I mean, all the way to the data center, either be an IoT device, either be a customer, or being a device, a measuring device that we're trying to control. The NIST is one of the many frameworks that are used in the industry, and they transcend operational technology and information technology. And the framework, the NIST framework, it provides a common language for understanding, managing, and expressing cybersecurity risk internally and externally. As part of the model, we identify the threat and provide the visibility of the entire ecosystem. That was part of our first chat. The network access control with a next generation firewall. The next generation firewall, in the case of operational technology, what we want to look at is a good balance in between active and passive monitoring. Dynamic policy management and multi-factor authentication, security as close to the edge as possible. The key takeaway from here is enforcing the rules through the next generation firewall. So when we look at the industry models, NIST as one, and the other one or the other two that are more popular within operational technology and critical infrastructure is the Purdue model and IEC 6243. Both of them, I mean, leverage heavily, I mean, next generation firewalls to protect the devices all the way from the data center and the division of the data center and the plant, all the way to the devices, actuators, IEDs, PLCs. The next generation firewall is also the agent that will provide the first layer of visibility and control as close to the device that we're trying to protect as possible. The inspection, we know because of the nature of some of the legacy devices in operational technology, they don't like active pinging or active monitoring. That's why in Fortinet, our next generation firewall has an industrial signature set embedded in the OS that will look at traffic passively across the wire as it leaves the device, and also applying vulnerability protection in the form of IPS with over 1,800 signatures. We specialize in operational technology. Because we see traffic going passively across the wire, I mean, yeah, we have the ability to discover threats in addition to the remaining components of the next generation firewall that will look at malware and, of course, application control. As we said before, segmentation, and essentially when we're talking access control, either via being customers, being users, being technicians, we're talking about access controls for devices as those devices are being onboarded into the network. We know that one of the latest requirements for operational technology is integration or at least, I mean, having visibility of data provided by operational technology sector into an ERP. By doing that, it transverses the boundaries of in between IT and OT. When that happens, either headless devices or otherwise, we need to have the visibility and create that secure conduit, as I mentioned before. And again, for users, for physical users, or for human users, as I call them, we need to have the audit controls in place. Because of the nature of some of the devices that we have, these devices, especially legacy devices, we cannot update those devices to using our current methods of protection. So some of these devices, what I'm referring to is particular HMIs that run on legacy OSs. They do have vulnerabilities associated with the length or the age of the operating system. Because of the manufacturer requires that particular version of the operating system in that device, it kind of limits the amount of patching that we can do directly to it. So our recommendation is, as we start creating the controls, and we can shroud that device in what we call virtual patching and essentially protect the vulnerabilities from the outside in. When we're talking about visibility in a passive way, I mean across the wire, the FortiGate and FortiOS, I mean, will do deep packet inspection and look at the payload of the packet going across from the PLC IED all the way to the SCADA historian or master. That gives us that level of granularity assures us or gives us the ability to make some routing policy decisions. I mean, based on what goes across, to the point that we can look at a particular register and take an action based on that. We can either allow it, pass it, monitor it, deny it, or quarantine that traffic based on a condition that we see in a particular register. Looking at automatic microsegmentation, some of our devices, what we see, one of the issues that we see when we speak in control is the fact that sometimes devices are replaced or they're added to the environment without the knowledge of the SOC or not. In that case, we have a big concern because we cannot assess the security posture of that device. Automatic microsegmentation, or at least having visibility at layer 2 of the OSI model, gives us the ability to, assign or move that device securely to a VLAN that we have that has the security controls and conduits already built in. That is done at layer 2. In Fortinet, we have an application called Fortinet, and that application, as I said, can profile a device in either one of 20 different methods, including, and it's not vendor specific to Fortinet, it's vendor agnostic, and we can interact with over 170 vendors. This is a very small sample of the products and security approaches that we have to operational technology in Fortinet. But all these components are part of a bigger system called, the security fabric. And the security fabric is a collection of devices, and that they provide security. I mean, in the cloud, it's an open ecosystem, meaning that we interact with other vendors. We are good cybersecurity stewards in this business, so we know that we're not alone. We take pride in integrating with other vendors. And also, all the components of the security fabric, as I mentioned, the FortiGate, which is our next generation firewall, integrates directly with Fortinet. And in other cases, when we have devices that provide advanced threat protection and such, they exchange information, threat information accordingly. Zero trust access, adaptive cloud security, fabric management, single pane of glass, visibility of all the components of the security fabric and the devices that we protect. Devices that offer segmentation and all the way from access layer segmentation to VPN authentication and protection, application control, endpoint protection, deception, and sandboxing. Specific to OT, Fortinet has designed specialized hardware, ruggedized to meet the needs of the field, from minus 30 degrees centigrade all the way to plus 50 degrees centigrade. Access points, switches, firewalls, next generation firewalls. Even though these devices are specifically made for the field to withstand, live in harsh conditions, the OS is the same. The operating system is the same. So FortiOS offers a technician the fact that the learning curve is very flat. Once you learn FortiOS, it will be the same from devices that are ruggedized devices all the way to devices that are deployed in a data center. Our FortiOS is equipped with built-in signatures that are specific to operational technology. As I mentioned, we can identify the standard protocols. DMP3, Modbus, Ethernet IP, BACnet, and make this routing decisions and offer the controls passively in that from FortiOS. We do have, specialized, professionals like myself and others that will dedicate our time specifically to OT. And as I said, our ecosystem of applications, not only specific to OT, but outside, there's over 400 partners or technology partners that we integrate. Part of FortiOS, as I said, included with the FortiGate, and this is embedded in the OS, is deep packet inspection, IPS, firewall, of course, OT traffic monitor, encryption. We do VXLAN, VLAN, and proxy, all within the OS. Advanced security, advanced features like SD-WAN, which is, again, a lot of our clients are leveraging SD-WAN that is embedded within FortiOS, not only as a cost-saving measure, but also since it's all part of the OS, we take a different approach to SD-WAN where we offer application aware WAN that is secure, because everything is part of the secure OS. That allows protection, DLP built in it, and it's a Wi-Fi controller, part of the OS, web filtering, SSL, and that firewall can also be virtualized. From left to right, the newest devices that we have, they are include a 3G, 4G modem. Also, the 35D for maritime operations, the FortiGate 30D, which is something on the smaller size, more suited to be installed in a DIN rail in a cabinet in a remote location, along with switches and wireless access points that are also ruggedized, specialized for the field. As I said, Fortinet is a steward of cybersecurity, recognizing the need to integrate with other security vendors and providers. And as I mentioned before, the ecosystem is large, and some of these names, you might recognize. Specific to OT, to operational technology, we have, visibility partners like Dragos Clarity, Industrial Defenders, SCADA, Fence and Tenable, control vendors that we have, not only that we have partnerships and some type of association with them in terms of creating products together, but We have, because of these relationships, we address CVEs and vulnerabilities, and we keep that. We develop the signatures, I mean, as soon as the CVEs are announced. Also other partners, integration partners, and orchestration and automation partners as well. I mentioned before the need for leveraging the SD-WAN capabilities within the FortiOS. One of our clients, Waste Management, they had a requirement to modernize over 2,000 plants, and in addition to deploy the FortiGates to protect the landfills, which, by the way, landfills are a really complex operation, mostly because they do methane and gas recovery and reprocessing. They reduce their operational costs by moving away from MPLS circuits in most cases and utilizing commodity internet connections to reduce costs. The cost reduction, I mean, they save over $20 million annually. We also said, as I said during the previous slides, it is secure. So we have a secure connection over SD-WAN as well. And back to you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Carlos. And just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have questions and you'd like us to address those, please shoot them in the questions chat on the console within the GoToWebinar view. A couple questions we have already submitted, Carlos. I'll start with the first one. You talked about different types of control that's needed on the network for devices, for users, for traffic, making sure they only do what they're supposed to do. How are each of them weighted? Is there one or the other that is more at risk in what you have control over and what you don't? Does one create more concerns for cybersecurity in an environment like OT?
Yeah, and I'll give you my opinion as I see as I have seen in the business from the last 30 years, and it's all part of a system. I mean, taking the approach of one is more important than the other will create some type of deficiency in the one that we leave behind. So the recommendation of what we've seen that works best in systems is seeing security and operational technology environments and taking a programmatic approach that will include access controls, physical device access control, and the role-based access controls for the people that are going to be accessing those systems.
Thank you. I think we've seen cybersecurity in recent headlines in a number of industries in the last 30 or 60 days. What role did control, the ability to control the network, have with these bad actors and their ability to execute one of their campaigns?
Yeah, control is again, it's a really broad term when we think about it, but the reality is within control, and when we're talking about the spread of a threat, microsegmentation and accessing and profiling the device as it comes into the network is really important. And now looking at the device at layer 2 OSI. So the moment that that device is added to the network, two things will happen. Recognize and identify that device and put it in the proper location where it will operate. And of course, then look at the behavior of that device. By looking at the behavior, looking at where it came from, moving that device into a protected or a secure conduit side of the environment, then we can mitigate a threat if it appears.
Excellent. We had a question, another from the audience, and they're asking about integration with other systems. Specifically, you talked about Fortinet as one of our applications and other vendor switches that come from perhaps competitive locations or competitive vendors. What's our stance on our integration with a mix of devices and switches in an environment where Fortinet might be helping to secure that environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We understand that we would like for the client to replace all their switches with Forti switches, of course, but that is not necessarily feasible or realistic. We know that most companies, I mean, they grow either by acquisition or they grow by mergers and such. So yeah, the advantage of Fortinet is that it is vendor agnostic. As long as we can communicate with the switch in standards base, and that switch has management capabilities, either but via SSH, Telnet, SNMP. If we can communicate with the switch, Fortinet can apply and take control of that switch and apply set controls, as I said before. I mean, upstream, and either create layer 2 segmentation, and that layer 2 segment have a policy associated with it upstream, or indeed even block the device if it's not recognized and approved by the company.
Yeah, great partnership with lots of different technologies. That's one of Fortinet's principles for sure. We have time for one more question. As we promised people 30 minutes, we're a minute over, but I think this is a good question. The question is, would Fortinet's solution, when you need to scan OT devices for vulnerabilities, would Fortinet be a solution that replaces some of those technologies someone might already have? And a couple of examples were like Tenable, Qualys, et cetera. Would what Fortinet is offering replace those or partner with those? How would that work?
In some instances where the technology is going, I will say that those technologies are complementary, and depends on the level of analysis that you want to do. Ultimately, what we want to do in all our networks is whitelist the traffic that you want to move across the network. You want to whitelist the traffic from the A to Z, the destination that needs to go. Most of this, the companies mentioned, they do analysis, and they're very valuable in terms of behavior analysis. They will look at a device and look at patterns of change over time. I hate to use the term AI, but I will call it more machine learning in terms of behavior analysis, doing a long-term statistical analysis, and again, do linear regression by collecting many data points. We are going in that direction ourselves as well. However, those partners, I mean, they do complement that in a different way.
Thank you, Carlos, for taking so many questions from our audience. They were really excited to get your feedback today. As we wrap up, if you don't mind going to the next slide, I wanted to just highlight the fact that this particular program, this 3-part clinic, is part of a program called Nothing But Fortinet. And it is a program that we launched early in March and is giving our customers who attend this clinic an opportunity to participate in a great experience called bracketology. So for those of you who attended today, you'll be receiving a link to register for our second bracketology event. It's March 24th. It's the Sweet 16 with Joe Lenardi, and you'll be able to register and listen in on his view of the basketball tournament that we all know and love happening here over the next several weeks, getting his point of view on where the teams are at and what might be happening as the brackets reduce down to that Final Four event. So watch for a note in the next few days where you'll get a link. You can register to the March 24th event. And for those of you who haven't registered for our third and final event in this series, the third clinic is next week, March 18th. And we would welcome an opportunity for you to listen in our discussion for situational awareness. If you'd like to attend that, the registration link is at the bottom of the slide here, events.fortinet.com/OT Best Practices Clinic. We hope that you will join us for that session. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of our best practices for operational technology security. We've covered visibility, we've covered control. Next week, we'll cover situational awareness. Enjoy your day.